So this afternoon we're talking about the business of transforming education. I'm going to introduce our two AWS hosts. Paul Grist, who's standing over here, is head of our education practice for EMEA in AWS, and Pilar Torres, who you would have seen in the keynote, heads up our practice in Iberia. So over to you guys.
Thanks so much, Noel. Welcome everybody. Welcome back after lunch. I think you all saw before lunch the keynote from Iñaki, who's from Santillana here, and with Pilar, which I think has set the stage for this afternoon session really well. Some great themes that they brought out, particularly Iñaki talking about cost saving, and the one number I'm going to carry around for the rest of my life is $20 per user down to 89 cents per user. That's an incredible number, isn't it? Testament to the use of the cloud. But most importantly, we're talking about transforming the business of education. And what we want to use this session for is really to think about the impact on students, outcomes of learning, and the new learning models that Iñaki talked about in the morning session. So we'll have the panel introduce themselves in a moment. I just want to say thank you for them all. Glenn has come from South Africa today. A fantastic animation, AR, VR business that he'll talk about. Fantastic guy. Spent a lot of time with him the last couple of days, and he'll be around after as well. And as he's got to go back to South Africa, please don't lose the opportunity to talk to him today. Also welcome Iñaki, who's from Spain, and Julia and Chris, who've come from London today. So, please do grab all of them after the session. We might have a little bit of time. They've all got a lot to say. We did a little rehearsal last week, and I have to tell you, I couldn't shut them up. So they've got tons to say. Lots of exciting stuff. These people are driving change. They're driving transformation. So we'll try and find some time for questions, but don't let them go without talking to them if you don't get your question answered. So the first thing I want to do is just turn it to the panel and just ask them to introduce themselves and say what their job title is.
Hi everyone, and thank you so much for coming to this panel. My name is Iñaki Velez de Guevara, and I'm responsible for implementing the whole digital architecture in Santillana Group. Santillana is an editorial group based in 22 countries, focused on Latin America, on Spain and Portugal as well, and is the leader in 20 of them. Santillana is helping to transform education, but Santillana is using the technology to help to transform the educational sector. Today, Santillana has almost 2.5 million of users in digital ecosystems. And to be honest, Santillana is really transform education, not with the technology, thanks to the use of the technology that is completely different. Before that, Santillana is seen in new learning trends. Learning trends first, and technology second. But we need the technology.
Great.
Hello, everyone. So my name is Julia von Klonowski, and I am digital director for an organization called Career Colleges Trust, who are a charity who operate in the UK within the further education sector. So that's kind of 14 to 19, and particularly with young people who are on the vocational track as opposed necessarily to the academic track. So what we do is colleges apply to be a career college, and what they have to do is actually prove that there is a skill shortage in the geographical area that they exist in. So I have currently got 4 digital colleges, and Wales is about, which is a country in the UK, for those of you who don't know, is about to go online as well. But we also have colleges who concentrate on engineering, hospitality, construction, social care, health, all the different kinds of areas that we all know there is a huge skill shortage in. So what we do is, colleges and education institutions tend to deliver a qualification. So we kind of have a little mantra, which is careers, not courses, because most employers that we talk to, and I come from a corporate background similar to to Amazon, so I kind of cross over between both education and business. And what we do is link colleges with employers and try and get colleges to deliver employer-led education so that young people end up, when they get to 19, that they are employable. So we wrap, if you like, all the employability skills around their learning and their curriculum. So I've been working very closely with Amazon around how we build and help young people to be career ready rather than just having some kind of qualification that many employers are looking and saying that's not sufficient.
Afternoon, everyone. My name is Chris Jackson. I lead the Cloud Platforms organization at Pearson. Pearson have been a company in business now for over 170 years. Started out in construction, went into media, but publishing, and then educational publishing, moving into now digital education services, is really the heart that drives the business forward. We operate in most countries, and we are really on a path to build an education platform for the world. So my group works in the technology organization. We are providing the low-level infrastructure. We work closely with AWS to build the foundational components that internal development teams can then work on to provide great educational experiences for kids and educators around the world. We've been running now in this team for about 3 years, and we started out with very little cloud strategy, and we're now midway through a fairly major cloud strategy which touches everything from our data centers all the way through to our public cloud services. And my particular group are working closely on containerized microservice architectures for next generation digital applications.
Perfect.
Hi, I'm Gilles. I'm the CEO of SeaMonster Animation and Games. I don't know about you, but I really want to be part of a new narrative, a new story that we're telling ourselves, that young people are firing in their imaginations about the world and what that could look like. The platforms are amazing, but at some point we've got to reduce this to something that is bite-sized, visual, measurable, engaging, and that's where animation is such a powerful tool to tell stories, tell them at scale, and engage with archetype so that we can really shift behavior at that psychological level. On the gaming side, the disease really is hopelessness. I think we all sometimes feel disengaged. I think we feel we don't have agency in our life. And so how do you give interactions, how do you make interactions that are meaningful, goal-directed, dare I say, fun, and serious games are absolutely one way that you can do that. So at SeaMonster, the animation to tell the stories, the new narrative, and games to really drive that behavior change and give that safe place to learn and fail. So we do a lot of augmented reality. We find it's a brilliant way to connect the real world and the digital world, bring things alive. We're learning in the virtual reality space. Maybe I'll get a chance to share some of our early successes and failures with you. And we tend to work with companies and organizations who've got big problems, simple but big. And because we're quite expensive, except compared to all the alternatives. So if you want to get to something that's truly scalable and cost-effective, you need to start with a big audience in mind, and obviously that's where things like AWS really come into play. The data that we yield from our platforms allows us to present customized learning solutions down to the individual level, and that's really exciting, so that learning can be just for you, which is quite a powerful idea. But yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Glenn. So maybe you can share with the audience examples, real-life examples, where you've used innovation in your different businesses, and also to share in this safe environment what worked for you, what didn't work, what were your learnings, and what the people here can take away with them. Iñaki?
There are several innovations that we are really using in our business. The first one is not regarding cloud. The first one is how to build learning ecosystems as a technological company. I mean, Santillana is an editorial group focused on educational sector for primary and secondary, but it's an editorial group. Santillana is not a technological company, no so far. This is the first innovation. I know that it's not regarding the cloud, but it's very important for us. The second innovation that is working, is really working, is how to use properly the educational standards in terms of technology. I'm talking about how to implement properly in the educational sector things like accessibility from the World Wide Web Consortium, how to chain data in a correct way from INS Global Learning Consortium. But finally, of course, we need to implement a specific new learning and evaluation models, cloud. Because if not, it's not possible. I'm completely sure you cannot implement evaluation solutions or solutions to evaluate nationwide with a traditional model. Of course, I'm talking about auto-scaling. Auto-scaling is an innovation today? I'm not really sure, but for us, it is. Of course, I can't to talk about machine learning, but I prefer to talk about auto-scaling because for us, it's a real innovation for our sector. It's how to move from one country to 13 countries with the same tool in just 6 months. 3 years ago or 4 years ago, it wasn't possible at all. And today, it's really possible. For us, it's a real innovation. This is the real innovation for us, auto-scaling. It's not machine learning. We are implementing machine learning, but things like that is a real innovation.
Okay. So I suppose I approach innovation in a different technology and innovation in a different way because I'm dealing with young people. And our assumption often is that young people understand digital and understand technology, and they do from a personal how to use it perspective, but they don't understand it always from a business perspective. So how to keep themselves secure, how the fact that something that they put online when they're 16 is going to come back and haunt them when they're trying to look for a job at a company like Amazon. So I work on it more from the perspective of how do we teach young people the correct digital etiquette, and sometimes that's not using technology, and sometimes it is using technology. But what we've discovered, and that's partly through one of the projects we run with Amazon, is young people, like most of us, really understand it when they put it into practice. So we run projects with Amazon and often and always with a charity, because part of it is about teaching them to be good citizens. Where they put into practical use the type of skills that we know they need in business. An obvious example is email. So we are still using email in all of our businesses, but young people are not taught how to write an email. They're not taught how to write a letter. So, you know, my generation, we taught how to write a letter and then we translated that into email. So when we ran a big project this year, and I got 650 responses from students which had no subject and no content in, and I had to open the attachment, and all it took was me telling them that when they sent an email, they said, "Dear Julia," and "kind regards," and after that, I got 650 proper emails. It took a very small amount. So I guess if I was thinking about innovation, I think our assumption is that people know more than they know. And I guess the issue that I discovered, my learning was that we assume that the people who are teaching them are up to date with our technologies. So they know about machine learning, and they know about Internet of Things, and they know about cloud, and they don't. So if you're teaching maths, 2 + 2 is 4, and it's always going to be 4. If you're teaching in this digital space, it probably changes every month, every 6 months. So keeping staff up to date is something that we're now adding into the programs that we're running with Amazon and running with that kind of age group. So that would be kind of, from the beginning, my learning.
I think given the nature of the work we're doing in the technology space, I have the luxury of being surrounded by innovation all the time. We are building containerized platforms. We are trying to enable a platform and a capability in Pearson that goes to product and developer teams and says, yeah, you can do that. Don't worry about things like time to market. We can help you to move quickly and to release globally. I think when you come to a partner like AWS, there is so many different services that there is still the need. And I think one of the things we've learned is that working in a technology operations function, we've had to find out what our role is alongside a giant like AWS. How do we add value to our internal users while still trying to understand how we use it on the back end? And I think the big learning for us has been that navigating all those different services is still quite a complex thing for a group. And if you take a group of developers who are writing educational services, you want the majority of their time to be spent working on educational outcomes and creating great experiences. What we see ourselves doing there is providing and packaging those things to developers in workflows and pathways that just make sense to them. So they haven't got to worry about spending a whole bunch of time writing code, connecting services together. We can give them those umbilicals, and that really gives us a focus on shipping quickly and at speed to different global locations. So the customers that are leveraging our platform are already shipping to multiple global regions. Because of the use of containerization, we're seeing a reduction in cost to deliver those platforms, and also we're not compromising stability and performance at the same time. What I would say is that, going through that journey, we've also had to learn about what scale means. Obviously, containers explode at a rate that you can only dream of with VMs. So managing that infrastructure at scale is one thing. But also, when we talk about stuff like auto-scale, I'm also guilty of standing there saying, well, you want your elasticity in your front ends to go in and go out. When you run a global business in education, there isn't really a peak time. There's always someone learning at some point in the world. So for us, it's about learning the different dimensions of scale. And really, that's about things like content. Managing content at scale is completely different from scaling a user base. So pivoting that around and looking at things we maybe hadn't considered and how we have to engineer differently for those has been one of the biggest learnings for us.
3 very quick case studies, really, to answer the question. The first is a big one for the... All good? Yeah, okay. The biggest insurer in Africa is called Old Mutual. I don't know if you know this about insurance, but it's actually very boring. Yeah, it's worse than that, actually. But anyway, we created a market-making play for them. It's a digital learning solution called Moneyversity. All the questions you were always afraid to ask about insurance. And it's fun, it's engaging, and it's visual. And it's really been incredible to see people coming back. And once they found out obvious places or a place to get an obvious answer to something like what is a retirement annuity or insurance scheme or whatever, people come back. If they find something that they can trust. Now, here's a joke for you in this day and age. Brands are supposed to be about trust. And we often forget that. And yes, we have trust built into so much. That word has come up again and again today. But how do we show that trust? How do we build on that trust? So learning out of Moneyversity, the Old Mutual play, was really that. The second quick one was an instant loyalty scheme, these collectible cards. You've seen them. They've been around forever. It's a Dutch company. And what we did is we created an augmented reality wrapper layer to kind of gamify the whole experience. So one of the defining characteristics about games is that they are voluntary activities. Their opposite is called work, which is why they've got to pay us to do it. So it was incredible. Here's a 100 meg application with no extrinsics, so no prizes, no discounts, none of that stuff. We got 500,000 downloads in South Africa, which is a tiny little market. We got 970,000 in Poland in 12 weeks. Just goes to show you that if you can tap into that intrinsic motivation, get people talking about something, that you can really drive engagement. And the last one I wanted to mention is virtual reality. We came across a client, ArcelorMittal. You might have heard of them. They're the biggest steel manufacturer in the world. One of their big challenges is that people are scared of heights. Everybody is, but 9% of people, about 9%, are so scared that they literally freeze. And it's great. It takes them 5 minutes to assess that. Except health and safety won't let the guys go up for 2 weeks. So it takes them 2 weeks and 5 minutes. And when we heard that, we'd like, finally, here's the perfect use case for virtual reality. So you put the glasses on, up you go. We can do a whole lot of stuff. We can do color blindness tests, which is also a material thing when you work in those dangerous environments. And it's proven to be extremely successful, properly industrialized, rolling it out at scale across South Africa. They're rolling it out to plants everywhere. So it goes to this idea about being bold, planning to succeed around something that is innovation, recognizing when it works, and then scaling it out from there. And yeah, just some examples.
Okay. Fantastic. Anything that didn't work for the first time that you tried?
All of it.
All of it?
I was going to say, it's interesting because you talk about trust, and yet the problem we have to teach young people is almost not to trust. So critical thinking is something that we try and include in everything that we do, because as we know, they read something and they trust it. So we try and teach them that you can't necessarily trust. And of course, some of the major brands that they trusted have not been so trustworthy in the last, I won't name any of them. You all know who I mean. But trying to teach them critical thinking so that they trust the right organisations is actually a major thing. So.
And Chris, I wanted to ask you, you began to touch on some of the challenges of using the cloud in terms of containerization becoming something that you need to get your head around and how that reacts to demand. I mean, what do you see as your number one challenge with using the cloud? Is it that? Is it skills?
I think skills is coming along. Technology tends to go through waves. So there are certain times when you're competing in very aggressive market for skills. There's times when actually that stuff is becoming more commodity. I think the biggest challenge is understanding what you should care about and what you should maybe leave alone. I talked to my team about the idea that technology is like a rolling road. And if you stand on a treadmill and you stay still, you will eventually fall off the back. And I kind of call that moving into commodity. But equally, if you run so fast, you're on the leading edge of it, you might toe the lip and break your nose, and that's the bleeding edge. So it's about maintaining that sweet spot where technology is not quite mature enough to become a commodity, but can add value to an organization. And what I say to my team is the one guarantee is that road will keep moving faster and faster over time. So we're going to have to get fitter and fitter and be more and more disciplined about when we let go of technology and leverage commodity. I think, Amazon helps with that in a big way by helping us to understand where that commodity service layer starts, so where we can start to stop thinking about some things and focus on the next thing that's coming down the track.
And how do you govern that, Chris? So how do you keep people in the middle of that treadmill? What sort of processes do you use? Because you're obviously encouraging innovation and inventiveness and wanting people to be creative, but at the same time, that can't get out of control. So what kind of processes do you have in place to keep that balance?
So we use a number of things. Obviously, we're running production workloads. So our test and our release strategies validate stability and viability. But also on the individual engineers, I kind of refer to them each as Spider-Man, right? And with Spider-Man movies, with great power comes great responsibility. So I really drive that responsibility onto the individual engineer. You can pull anything you want from open source. You can use any library that takes your fancy, but you are responsible for its implementation. And when it goes, pop at 3 o'clock in the morning, it's going to be you that we call because no one else is managing that repository. So it's about just helping engineers take accountability for some of their decisions. And actually, that covers most of the issues. Beyond that, really testing again as part of our release processes covers the rest.
And have you shifted development models more towards DevOps as you've moved to the cloud? How's your development model changed?
Absolutely. So we work in a very segmented organization. So I represent a technology function that then interfaces into developer teams and product teams, ultimately then sales and business teams. So DevOps for me isn't just about developer teams and operations teams, it's about all the different facets of those different segments that need to come together to enable a business outcome to be great. So, we start with what we can touch. It's about bringing our security teams to the table, it's about bringing our QA teams to the table, and if we can build a more integrated picture to a developer, we're streamlining how we can release value. But I don't think that really ever stops. I think we've really doubled down on things like security, and that's been one of the major success stories of our transformation, has been helping our security organization to understand the value of security as code alongside infrastructure as code, rather than coming to meetings with policy documents and checklists. We're now having pull requests and mergers. It's a transformation how we're trying to put things together.
Perfect. And Iñaki, from a customer perspective, is there something you've tried that really hasn't worked, or is there a learning model you tried that you see it did not work, and what were the reasons for that?
Yes, from the customer perspective,
Yeah.
how to transform our product. Our customers needs additional innovations, not only with auto-scaling. It doesn't matter for the customer, the auto-scaling, what happened. But for us, it's very important to match the learning method with the cloud. It's how to implement this learning method thanks to use of the cloud. For instance, with learning for discovery, for us it's very important to get from the cloud semantic search properly in a cost-effective way with high availability and so on. And also, for instance, in adaptive learning, to adapt for every child what this child really need. We need things such as machine learning. Then for us is just do it. We don't have any process to innovate at all, because we were native on the cloud.
Okay.
We started with just 6 months, 6 years ago, with a traditional infrastructure model. But after that, we moved all of our solutions to the cloud. And today is just do it. If you have a new functionality on the cloud, and this functionality can enhance the functionality for the final user, for the customer, please implement this functionality, and that's all. And also, we were native as well in DevSecOps. For us, this is a commodity way to build technology for the final user.
Yep.
It's not an innovation, but it's not an innovation because we build all the learning ecosystem in this way.
Perfect.
Okay. Where do you see yourselves, the education business, evolving? You've talked about very, very cool things that are new, from listening to practicing, from boring to fun, this auto-scaling, always being peak time. How do you see the education evolving, and how do you see yourselves into this evolution from your respective companies? Glenn?
One of the smartest guys I know told me that learning is about being able to do something that you couldn't do before. Not know something, but do something. And that left a very profound impact on my view about what the world is going to look like in the future world of work and the future world of learning. I think a lot of our education is still very much just in case learning. Yeah, we'll just chuck all the compliance stuff at you, because then we can say we did it, versus just in time. So I think there's going to be a profound shift to self-learning. I think it's not going to look anything like we currently understand it. Just look at the YouTube generation, where they go to, where this, is more trustworthy and is the source of their knowledge about so many different things. That knowledge shared often for no gain at all, where experts are going out there and just for the love of their subject, their passion, are sharing knowledge with people who are pulling down pieces as they go. Where do we fit into that world? Because if we don't, we stand a real danger that all of us, in some sense, perhaps not Amazon so much, but the rest of us will be somewhat redundant in this world, because if I can learn to do something and my employer or me, myself, as in my own job, my own work, my own business, I can just learn what I need, then are these traditional structures really the way to go? And how radical is the change that is needed there from both a government perspective and an institutional perspective? But who holds me by the hand and leads me to the promised land? Who is the curator? Who is my river guide? Who is the person that tells me the things I don't know that I don't know? And so we're going to see massive layering in. And I loved what you were saying earlier, Julia, about just the simplest things about, you think you're so high-tech and super cool, and yes, you can figure out all the technology, but actually, you're just rude, okay? You have no empathy skills. And I think for me, as much as the technology is critical, it's how we use that to teach people to care. The world needs more people to care. So you can call it user-centered design. I wanted to pick up on what Chris was saying about, we must ask ourselves, why are we using the technology? Why somebody would care? Why would somebody come back? Why would they want to use this? And if we keep asking that, it's a messy business, because we actually have to listen to them and follow a much more, shall we say, organic approach to the world. So for me in my business, we're going to teach the world to care. We're going to build a product around empathy training, and we're going to call it customer service training, so that we can get some of our corporate clients to pay. But actually, it's a big secret. Don't tell anyone. It's actually just empathy. We're going to productize. We spend a lot of time at the bleeding edge. It's really painful. My home loan feels it. But if we can find a way to create annuity income, then we can scale that and hopefully in a small way demonstrate a new model of how value will be created in this future world of work.
So I think for us, we are serving many of the existing education providers already. So we see this on both sides. We see the complexities of our customers needing to change at the same rate that we can. But equally, the opportunities that present themselves within the technology space to enable new kinds of outcomes. I think that the consumerization is the main trend here. The usage models, the adoption models of content and how people learn is changing, as Glenn alluded to. I think that it's an on-demand culture now. It's not around using the 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. school day to teach someone an outcome. It's about using that to reinforce topics, but those topics will be based on what that individual chose to learn in their own personal time. So the availability of that platform at all hours of the day to suit when someone decides to engage in learning is absolutely key. And I think for us, the challenge for me from a very technological standpoint is I am building platforms that can release capability multiple times per day. I can incrementally add value to a learner's experience multiple times per day. What impact does that have to grading and assessment, right? What if one of my major releases actually makes it way better for people to be able to pass an exam? How do we keep certification tracking at the same pace that we can release value to the market? It's a big challenge for how we think about what does done mean in an educational context. So for me, it's about understanding where we can move quickly, where we can open up the throttle and give people the ability to do new things, and where we have to respect the institutions of education to make sure that we are assessing people in fair and reasonable ways. Where do I see myself in all of that? I'm the guy at the back of the horse just saying, go faster, go faster.
So where do I see myself in 5 years? I hope doing exactly what I'm doing, but better. So I hope that I'm still in touch with Amazon and the young people and things that I work with. I guess I kind of come at it slightly differently, because one of the things that shocked me when I got involved face-to-face in the education that I do, the work that I do, is these are often, and we'll all have them, whichever country we come from, are young people who the education system has let down. So it's not those people that fly through the standard system. It's all of those young people who are so disillusioned and switched off, and how do you switch them on? So one of the reasons I got involved, first of all, with Amazon is because the skills shortage is huge, and everybody's drawing from the same pot. But there's huge numbers of young people out there who've got these amazing skills, but they're not wrapped up so that you recognize them. So I use an example when I'm talking to students. There's an Alexa. There's the Alexa. Here's one that's wrapped in beautiful wrapping paper and it's got bows around, and here's one that's got newspaper and string. And which one would you take? Well, you'll take the one that's wrapped in pretty bows, but it's an Alexa. It's the same thing. So all we're trying to do is put that pretty paper on the young people because they've got the skills. I asked a teacher once about why is it, so I've got 3 little grandchildren who are curious about everything. And then suddenly you've got a 16-year-old who really couldn't give, I'm not going to use a wrong word, so just couldn't care. And she said to me, the thing is, when they go to primary school, it's all about everything you can learn and you're answering their questions. And when they get to secondary school, so when they're 11 or 12, you're starting to tell them the things they don't need to know. So no, you don't need to know that because that's not what the exam is testing you for. So you begin to switch off, in a lot of cases, young people's desires. So one of the things we're doing with Amazon is how do we wrap these beautiful 16-year-olds who have, when you run a project like we ran with Amazon, and that's where the empathy thing comes in, while we always include a charity, and they now know about things like mental health and malaria, and they're amazed when they discover these things. How do you take all those skills that you've now developed, and how do you keep it going? Because, Amazon have some amazing education. They've got Educate, they've got Restart, they've now got the Academy, and people dip in and out, and then you get them really excited, and then what do you do with them? So after we finished the project, this last project we did this year, which had like 650 young people in, they went back to their colleges, to their parents, to their siblings, really, really, really excited. And if you don't maintain, because you've now switched them on, and when you switch them on, they come up with these incredible ideas that we wouldn't even think about, because they don't have the boundaries. They don't have the boundaries that necessarily that we have. You just have to try and kind of open it up for them. So I hope in 5 years' time that I'm still doing the work I'm doing, because it's unbelievably rewarding. The thing I would say, so most of you in the room are probably employers in one way or the other. Employers or businesses and education have to get closer together. So I speak to businesses all the time who moan that they're not getting the skills that they need. But the problem is that young people need you to give them work experience. They need you to give them shadowing. They also need you in some way to fund the equipment and the resources to keep them up to date, because colleges and schools cannot afford it. So either you need to put labs in your, like we have Alexa workshops and things like that. Either you need to put labs in your businesses that young people can come to, or you need to go into the colleges and provide it there. But if you want those skills, you've got to invest, and that's really important.
Thank you, Gilles.
In 4 years, okay. No, in 3 or 5. Okay. Yes.
You can go faster, you can do it in 2. So it's up to you.
Yes. Today, Santillana is helping to transform education. But Santillana, in the near future, will have to transform itself. I'm talking about the use of paper, for instance. Today we are selling textbook. I'm not completely sure if Santillana will sell textbook in 4 years or 5 years or 10 years. Perhaps the correct use of the cloud, or use the cloud properly in the near future for Santillana will be mandatory. How to deliver new learning system without cloud. It's not possible. And my role in 4 years, perhaps I'm not sure if my role or any team member from my team or from technology team, but I'm completely sure that because Santillana will have to transform itself, we have to move from the technical side to the social side. I mean, something like that, an engagement manager, or it will be good for us to have people like that, because the traditional model will have to change to the new one very quickly. And for us, it's very important that everyone in the company can understand that the use of the cloud and the technology will be mandatory in the new era.
Perfect, thank you. So I'm just looking at the clock, and we actually have a few minutes for any questions from the floor. Has anyone got any questions? We've covered quite a lot of ground here, from skills through managing technology, governance around technology, creativity, from Glenn in particular, sort of talking about how you motivate and engage people, and then back to Julia and how you do that with younger people, and then Iñaki's perspectives as well, which you've heard a lot from in the keynote as well. So any questions? Just raise your hand and Noel will bring you a microphone.
We obviously answered everything.
We've got one on the front row here.
Thanks. That was very interesting, thank you. But I think one of the things that certainly as a parent I've seen hampering children, particularly in schools, and it's something they learn there and then they kind of run into again and again in their professional lives, is that regardless of how they learn things, actually they're going to be tested on what they know rather than what they can do.
Yeah.
And it's certainly in the British education system, that's getting worse currently. And I'm just interested, from your perspectives working in this sector, what sort of timescale would you suggest it's going to take for actually the ways in which we test people to change to be much more about what they do than what they know?
Do you want me to answer?
Yeah, go ahead.
So in the UK, which is obviously the area I know now, the government, so is it Martin Luther King who said something along the lines, you can't necessarily change people's hearts, but you can change the law or change the policy. So one of the problems is that we have concentrated on academic education, which works for some young people. And in 2020, there is something called T-levels that are coming into the UK, which is a vocational track. So at 16, young people will be able to take a vocational track, which has 15 routes. So I can't name them all. Digital is one, there's construction, there's healthcare, all the areas that we talked about that are skills shortages. So instead of just testing in the sense of academic and what you know, part of that will be work experience and part of that will be practical. And that's where they begin to learn that it's not just about, it's about lots of things. I know in my children's case, the fact that they have people skills is what's made them successful. It's actually, yes, they have a degree each, but that's not what's got them through and made them successful. So there is definitely a piece of work to be done on developing young people's people skills, which is part of one of the reasons for T-levels and the work that we do. But I think it's about applying the knowledge. That's when their mind's open, and that's why it's so important that employers get involved right from age 4, kind of almost upwards. I don't know if does that answer your...
Thank you. Yes, that's interesting about the UK. I was sort of interested about Europe as well.
Glenn, did you want to?
Yeah.
Yeah, mine's just a quick one. What happens if people like Amazon start employing techies based on what they can do? Oh, hang on, they already do that. So to a lesser extent, your qualification is, it's important, but when the world leading player in technology is starting to think about what you can actually do and design assessments around that, we must be careful because, while we're busy preparing perfectly to fight the last war, you know, there are people who imperfectly preparing to fight the next one, and they will look for what people do and not what they know.
Yeah.
Once we bring in game-based simulations, AR and VR in particular is designed to test what you do, how you would react in particular situations. And so the rate of change will accelerate as these tools start to get used in assessments. But yeah, in the meantime, I suppose we still got to have that old memory game played at some level. But yeah, look at what Amazon's doing and take a cue from them.
I would imagine
I can give
as
you
well.
a quick piece of feedback there. So Amazon's hiring process is competency-based.
Yeah.
It's all about what you do, and it's a robust method. So yeah, and it's interesting to see how that gets applied, but it's all about the behaviors that lead to your ability to be innovative or, you know, to think big and so on. So I think it is competency-led, and I think that's what, Chris, you, I think, began to touch on this earlier when you're talking about the role of the institution, and to some extent, you know, the institution is there to kind of find compliance, but actually you've got the student on the one hand and you've got the world of work on the other hand, and is the institution helping or actually getting in the way?
And how are
And
they
Chris is from the
measured?
UK as well, right?
And how are they measured? Because if they're funded on the basis of their results in exams and assessment, then that's what they will continue to do, and that's where government has to come in to start measuring, because as we know, behaviour is based on how people are measured.
So I have a hope that this will come to a head in the next 10 years or so. Maybe not help your children or the people in this room's children, but if you look at where we're going with artificial intelligence and robotics, Pearson commissioned research around skill shortages and how particularly manual labour is going to become a non-existent trade. And I think that it's going to leave a generation of people somewhat shortchanged about their educational experiences. And I think that those people vote, whereas children don't vote right now. And I think they can make a very clear and message to governments and authorities around, I was under-equipped for the future. So I think potentially, you know, we might see something coming through people that have already exited education, realizing that that didn't afford them the best possible outcomes because of the rate of technology change.
Okay. Any more questions? We have a few more minutes.
Thank you.
Iñaki, did you want to make a comment? Or? Yeah.
While you think on your questions, you can.
So a non-UK response, I think that's helpful. Yeah.
Santillana is in the same way of everyone mentioned before. We would like to train in digital skills. For us, was very important to know about the new launch of Educate in Spanish. We would like to implement Educate in K-12 in Spanish and Portuguese, because we are launching several products to train in digital skills such as robotics, programming, but also cloud computing. We prefer that to forbid. The use of the cellular in Latin America, not the mobile, is very important for us because there is no one with a laptop at home. It's much better the use of the mobile phone inside the schools, because it's easier to have a mobile inside the school than in a laptop at home, especially in Latin American countries. You have to make sure that you are implementing properly educational applications inside the cellular, and to train in properly. This is the way, this is the approach from Santillana's side.
So part of the answer, in a way, is training young people to use their mobile phones for learning, continual learning, because we know they're going to have 6 or 7, 8 careers in their lifetime. So get them to do it from that perspective, not just for communication and talking to their mates or whatever, but actually it's a tool for learning. And that's, in many cases, is parents. But parents often don't know how to use this technology, so there's a whole education piece around that too.
So I think what I'm hearing to sum up is, is there another question? Perfect, yep.
Well, part of it has, I think, already been answered by Iñaki, because I wanted to know, what would you suggest as an interface to encourage teens to learn the mobiles were suggested, because what I have found is that like with Smart School or Caroline, which is used in Belgium, the kids are okay to use it the first or second year, and then they don't look at it again. And so what would you suggest as an interface or something to engage them to actually use it?
I can answer it. Oh, okay. So it's again about gaining their interest. So what happens at a certain age is they lose interest because it's all about being taught what they need to know. One of the things we do is try, because one of the problems is encouraging young people to get involved into careers in the digital, particularly girls involved in the digital space. So we try and turn it on its head. So you can't name me a business or an area that doesn't have digital involved now. So whether it's sport, fashion, health, whatever it might be. So we try and find out what is it they're interested in. So for example, if they're interested in sport, then get them to understand they can learn things through sport. There'll be games that are not just about winning or blowing somebody up. There are games that are actually about teaching them skills that they can put to their life. So often with that, it depends what age group you're talking about. It's about rather finding out what interests them and then making sure they're engaged in that, but then making it part of their lives. But then that's also about us. So many of us sit with our phones, and all we do on those phones is we WhatsApp, but we don't learn. So if your child says to you, "What are you doing on your phone, Mum?" We're not, or Dad. We don't say, "Oh, actually, I found a really interesting subject on here, and that's what I'm doing." The only thing probably you use is Google or Wikipedia. So it's also about us, as an example, showing that teaching and learning and these amazing applications that are out there are actually of use to them. Find something that interests them.
So my big fear was that we were just going to get going as we're running out of time, and that's happening. But we're going to give the last comment to Glenn because he's got the furthest to go.
Basically, let's not get caught up in the technology for its own sake, always. Remember the big why. And wait and see what's happening in augmented reality. We've seen nothing yet. The cell phone is going to be a window back onto the real world. It's going to layer information back. So you might want to check out something called Sumerian, which is an Amazon new release. It's just the beginning of what's possible about how your cell phone is actually going to connect you back to the real world. So don't panic yet. It'll be okay.
Yeah. I agree.
Okay.
I agree.
So we do need to draw it to close. So I'd like to say to Iñaki from Santillana, Julia from Career Colleges, Chris from Pearson, and Glenn from Sea Monster, thank you so much for your time today. Thank you.
Thank you. And please don't forget to fill the survey, because it's very important for us in order to make these sessions as valuable as possible to you and to improve for the future. Thank you very much.
And grab these guys before they disappear if you need to. Thank you.
Thank you.